Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Ute Dash. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Mora, and today I am joined by my lovely assistant at the Daily Utah Chronicle, Cole Bagley. How are you today, Cole?
Sammy, I am so good. Pac-12 football's back. I could not be more excited.
Let's
2020 is saved. Let's go.
let's go. Pac-12 football, Utah. We get football. That is so fun. Like we didn't think we were gonna get it until the spring, but now we got it. And with that, Cole and I were tossing around some ideas. Who's gonna lead the Utes this year in receiving, rushing, sacks? So Cole, who do you think is going to be the leading receiver for the Utes this year?
It's a close battle for me. Brant Keithy or Brian Thompson. Brant Keithy, I expect the tight end to come back bigger, better, stronger. I think he's going to be even better than he was last year. He was, I think, a pretty welcome surprise for us. You know, his first season he was just okay. Didn't see that many passes thrown his way. But last year, Tyler Huntley used him really well, and he was able to get a lot of yards for a decent amount of touches. And with the new quarterback that's coming in, which is going to be Bentley, he's going to have an even better season.
Yeah, I think even if it's rising, he's going to have a good season. He's set himself up as one of Utah's main targets. And it's going to be interesting to see if teams key in on that now that they know what he's capable of. Like last year, he had a great season for the U. Like he was putting up yards, he was putting up touchdowns. Like it was a really fun to watch Brant Keithy play last year. But I want to hear your argument on Brian Thompson before I go with mine.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Thompson, he as well was one of those bigger targets for Tyler Huntley. He's a guy that can make catches, but I think it's a lot of it has to do with his speed and his ability to get yards, after the catch. And so, for me, it depends on the style play of who's taking the snaps. But I'm going to go with Brant Keithy over Brian Thompson just slightly because he's a big target, but he's not only a big target. He can get a lot of yards after the reception. He averaged 17.7 a reception. So for me, Brant Keithy is going to be that leading receiver for Utah.
I love the argument for Keithy, but I think it might be Brian Thompson. Thompson's great. If Thompson can stay healthy, he is a legit deep threat for the Utes. Like he had 82 pass reception, 82 yards receiving last year. An 82-yard pass last year from Tyler Huntley. That was like one of the longest of the season. And he had 111 yards against Washington State alone. Like if he can stay healthy, it's great for him. And I think it looks really good for him as a deep threat for Utah. There's other people who could be making that jump to maybe be the leading receiver at Utah, but it's either Keithy or Thompson for me.
Yeah, it's a big arsenal for Utah. They've got Francis Nakua, they've got Britton Covey, a lot of guys.
Samson Nakua.
Sorry, Samson Nakua and Britton Covey. They've got a lot of guys that have seen a lot of balls come their way in the last few seasons, especially Britton Covey 2 years ago. It'll be interesting to see what he does coming back. I mean, we haven't seen that guy play football in, I believe, over a year now. He didn't really perform much. He was out with injury most of last season. He went out the season before. And so it's going to be interesting with him. But Brian Thompson and Brant Keithy are definitely going to be competing for the number one receiving position. And I'm excited to see those two hold a contest with each other. Hopefully they motivate each other to be better out there on the field. But I'm excited to see those guys get touches, get yards, and score touchdowns for the U.
For sure. And then Utah has a huge void to fill in that backfield with the departure of Zach Moss to the NFL. So who do you think is going to be the leading rusher for the Utes this year?
I think someone who is very similar to Zach Moss, and that player is Jordan Wilmore. You watch some of the highlights that this guy has already put up, and as well looking at some of the tape from his high school days. He had that similar ability to shed tackles and to power through like Moss did. Kind of kind of bounce off those guys, put one guy down on the ground and keep going and get a couple extra yards. Last season, he had 49 attempts and was able to turn it into 194 yards. So he averaged about 4 a carry. Jordan Wilmore is the guy for me.
Yeah, I think he's really great. I think Devin Brumfield did take a lot of the reps when Zach Moss wasn't taking them last year, and it shows because of those numbers. And I think Brumfield's he's gonna put up some big numbers this year, but I think Wilmore edges him out just a smidge on leading rusher. It's going to be I think Utah's going to run a 2-back system. I've said this for months. Utah's going to run a 2-back system because why not when you have 2 really good rushers in Jordan Wilmore and in Devin Brumfield. But yeah, he had his best game last year, honestly, was probably the Oregon State game last year. 4.9 carries, and it was 4.9 yards per carry, and he had 59 yards, and he had his first touchdown as a U. And you remember that touchdown? He was dragging an Oregon State defender into the end zone with him. If that alone doesn't show what Jordan Wilmore can put on the field, I don't know what does.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to take into effect that it was Oregon State. I don't know if those guys know how to play football up there, who's really playing football for them. But no, Jordan Wilmore is very impressive. He has that Moss-esque to him. He's only 5'8", 200 pounds, but the way that this guy powers through and continues and picks up extra yards, I think he's going to impress Kyle Whittingham in that offense. Now, I agree with you. I think to start, I mean, it's a shortened season. Mm-hmm. So we might see, these 2 guys taking the full load, on those handoffs together and splitting that. But I think maybe the last few games, especially if they're fighting for, the Pac-12 championship again, I think Jordan Wilmore might have that edge. Obviously, it comes down to performance. We'll have to see how these guys do. But I like Jordan Wilmore just a little bit more, just based off what I've seen this guy do in high school, and then like you mentioned, that Oregon State game.
I also think it depends on who can stay healthy the longest. Since Utah is known for being such a run-heavy team, they do have that cycle of running backs who come in and out, in and out. They did it a lot last year with Moss, Brumfield, and Wilmore. And I think it also comes down to who can stay healthy in the backfield. And I think whoever can stay healthy the longest and who can provide those big chunk plays is going to be the leading rusher for Utah. But another huge void the Utes have to fill is going to be our sack leader. Bradley Anae has also went to the NFL, current mayor of Sac Lake City. But who do you think is going to lead the team in sacks this year, Cole?
It's Devin Lloyd. This guy's coming off a great year from last year, but he kind of had to play in the shadow of a couple of players. I mean, we had Francis Bernard moving on, as you already mentioned, and with Bradley Anae, and I think he's going to be able to step into this role. I think it's Devin Lloyd's turn. Last year, he had 91 total tackles, 48 were solo, and 43 assisted. To have 91 total and to have more solo than assisted just shows that he can put himself in the right position to make plays and is fully capable of doing it on his own, which is great because then you're not having to pull a couple other extra guys, maybe opening up some short passes. He's able to get into the backfield and pull the quarterback down on his own. And he's clearly able to do that. We already trust him to do that, but now it's his turn. He's got to step up into that role now that so much of our defense is new.
Yeah, and last season Lloyd had 6.5 sacks, and that was with Bradley Anae, Lucky Fotu, John Pennisini, all on that defensive line. If he can have 6.5 sacks when you have 3 NFL caliber defensive linemen, what's he going to do now that he is an upperclassman? It's not that Utah has your entire defensive line. You still have a lot of good pieces coming back, but now that, like you said, he's not going to have to live in the shadow per se of these players like Bradley Anae and Francis Bernard. I think he's going to have a really good shot at being the sack leader. But I will say a dark horse contender for me is Mika Tafua. Mika Tafua was on the end last year, and he is able to get to the quarterback. So Defua might be a dark horse.
Yeah, I think both those guys are going to have to step up and really be the leaders on defense. The majority of our defense is gone. The majority of the guys that made big plays that really propelled Utah to winning the Pac-12 South and contending for a Pac-12 championship, they're all wearing NFL uniforms now. And the opportunity is there. The seats are open. It's time to step up, and I think both these guys possess the abilities, and I expect them to do so.
For sure. So, with that also being said, who are you looking forward to seeing most wearing a Utah football jersey this fall? Cole.
This fall, winter.
Yeah.
Jake Bentley. And the reason for that, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but Bentley is here to lead the Utah offense. A lot of people will make, the argument for Cameron Rising, but Bentley had 2 great seasons at South Carolina. He now has an arsenal of receivers at his disposal. With Brant Keithy, Britton Covey, Brian Thompson, and Nakua. And this guy, these guys have all had prime experience and now can be used even more so with a solid passing quarterback. Yeah, I can't see Whittingham bringing this guy in and not having him run the Utah offense. But that's why I'm the most excited, is because I believe it's going to be Bentley. He put up great numbers at South Carolina, which I'll dive into a little bit later. And we're going to see, I think, a different offense than we're accustomed to. Sammy, you had mentioned earlier that Utah is usually a pretty heavy running offense, which I still expect there to be quite a few runs on the offense, but I expect there to be more passes than usual. I think Bentley is a better passer than we've had in recent years. Even though Tyler was a above average passer, I think Bentley is really, really good, and I'm excited to see him and that Utah offense take the field.
I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. We've talked about it a lot, how Utah's replacing basically their entire defense. The only return starters you have are Mika Tafua and Devin Lloyd. So I think it's going to be – I'm really excited to see Clark Phillips III. Utah flipped his commitment from Ohio State like late in the game last year. He's a corner. I honestly think he could be the next Jalen Johnson that Utah has. I want to see if he can live up to this hype and this, how everyone's so high on Clark Phillips and how good he is and his coverage and how much of a ball hawk he is. I want to see if he can live up to those expectations that are placed on him, being now the highest rated recruit that Utah has ever signed. And I think Utah's one of the best schools at producing defensive backs. Like, look at last year, we had 2 drafted and 1 picked up in free agency. That's pretty good, or actually 2 picked up in free agency. That's pretty good with a secondary. So I'm excited to see Clark Phillips on the defense because I think he could be the next Jalen Johnson.
So Clark Phillips, he's coming in as a freshman, correct?
Yes.
So some of his stats, he's out of Lakewood, California. This guy's 5'10", weighs about 190 pounds. He did some damage while he was in California. Like you said, it looks like he's a 4-star recruit by 24/7 Sports, Rivals, and ESPN. He's rated the number 4 cornerback in the country by 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, that. How could you not be excited to see him play?
Oh, I absolutely am excited to see this kid play. But I think the college game's a little bit different than the high school game. I expect him to be fantastic, and I hope that we're able to keep this kid for a number of years. And he's probably I'd say he's in my top 5 for guys that I'm excited to see play.
I just think that he has the most opportunity to make in this situation, given the fact that Utah is replacing their entire secondary. He has some of the biggest, not biggest shoes to fill, but he has basically a straight path. He's going to be the day 1 starter. Like, that's hands down. Like, that's not even a question. Like, come November 6th or 7th, Clark Phillips will be lined up on the defensive side of the ball for Utah. And it's not like it's I just love Clark Phillips. I'm just excited to see him play. I think he's gonna be great. But yeah, I'm excited for him.
I mean, Sammy, what excites you most about this kid? What's his biggest strength? I mean, what's he do that other guys aren't? What got him to that 4-star level?
I just think it's the pressure he can put on these wide receivers. Like I've equated him to Jalen Johnson. Like you know how Jalen Johnson would stick on these receivers and made it hard for them to catch these balls. I think Clark is the same way. Clark is great. Clark is fast. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for this Utah secondary. And Sharif Shaw has done a fantastic job with all of our secondary or all of our corners in the past. And I don't see that stopping now. He put Jalen Johnson in the NFL, and Jalen is playing really well for the Bears. And I think he's Jalen 2.0.
He's definitely come to the right place. I mean, you look at the amount of defensive players that Utah was able to send to the NFL just last year alone, and these guys are already making impacts on the squads that they're on. We've already seen a couple names come up in pretty big headlines, and so it is exciting, especially to steal a player from Ohio State, the Ohio State, and to come to Utah. You got to give it up for the coaching staff. I mean, to take somebody, a 4-star recruit like that out of California who's already committed to a school that definitely is always right there in the playoff conversation and looking to win a national championship. It's impressive. And Sammy, he definitely is somebody I cannot wait to see rocking that drum and feather on the side of his helmet. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited to see whoever's under center for Utah. If it's Bentley, if it's Rising, whoever it is, I think it's going to be a good year. Like you've already mentioned, they have an arsenal of weapons. You have Covey, you have Thompson, you have Nakua. People are sleeping on Solomon Enos. We have him. You have Jalen Dixon. You have Cole Fotheringham. You have all of these weapons that are going to be able to make these big catches in big time moments. So I've always been more of a defensive kind of person, like watching football, but the last couple of years watching Utah and watching Utah build this offense with these star wide receivers and these great running backs and these good quarterbacks and these stout offensive lines, I'm starting to mold more towards being an offensive fan. I still love defense. I love a good big hit and like the next person, but I think this year's offense is just a little bit under where I like last year's offense. I was like, oh, like this is going to be the best offense Utah's had.
Mhm.
And I think that this year's offense doesn't get to the level of last year's offense, but it gets pretty close. Like I'm excited for Bentley, excited for Rising, whoever's going to be under center for the U, I think is going to kill it because you have such a strong arsenal of weapons. There's no way you can't be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the differences in this year's roster opposed to last year. You look, I mean, to me, they were almost equal. You know, whether the offense was on the field, the defense was on the field, you expected big things to happen. You know, with Tyler Huntley under center, Zach Moss in the backfield, you know, all those receivers out there, you expected touchdowns to come on almost every drive. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you weren't worried because of Julian Blackman, Jalen Johnson. You know, you had Bradley and I taking down those quarterbacks, stopping those plays. But this year, I think depending on the quarterback, I think the offense might be the greater strength for Utah. You know, I think the defense is going to be the side that you're holding your breath a little bit, just worried about how many points they're going to give up. Not getting blown out by any means, but I think we're going to have more confidence in our offense and expect them to lead the team as opposed to last year. I think it was 50-50, maybe a little bit more in the defense because the defense came up with big stops and created turnovers and got the offense the ball back, and they did their thing. But this year, I would say I'm a little bit more trusting of the offense, even though there's so many different things. I mean, we don't know who the quarterback is yet. We're probably going to be running 2 running backs. It's a little crazy, but that arsenal of wide receivers and the tight end is where my confidence is.
I totally understand that. Like the defense is not a huge question mark for me. The secondary, more specifically, is a question mark for me. We've talked about it on episodes past,
Mm-hmm.
but one thing is for sure, like Kyle Whittingham and his like defensive staff know how to reload talent and they know how to get out on that on the field and make sure that they come off it on third down. Like that's one thing for sure. Like I have more faith in the world. More like I have all the faith in the world in Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley and the defensive staff at Utah because Utah has proven themselves to be a defensive powerhouse.
Hmm.
So I'm not as worried about the defense as some people might be, but again, yeah, I'm a little bit more excited to see what the offense can do, but I want to see who on the defense is going to step up and make those big time plays that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, both sides will be very telling of how good the coaching staff is this year because huge turnover on both sides. I mean, you'd almost classify it as like a rebuilding year, right? Like almost.
On the defensive side, yeah, it is. You could call it a rebuilding year on the defense, but on the offense, not really. You lose your quarterback, you lose a running back, you lose one wide receiver, and you lose like 1 to 2 offensive linemen. But that leads us into the third topic perfectly, which is who on this Utah football team has the most to gain with the 2020 season being reinstated. So, Cole, who do you think it is?
Well, I've talked about both these players already, but now I just gonna dig in a little bit deeper. And with the season happening, I think there's a few guys on this roster that really needed it to happen in order to boost their potential draft stock, to make it to the next level, to go to the NFL. And those players are Jake Bentley or Brant Kuithe. Now, Brant was targeted 34 times last year in a primarily running offense, you'd say. He had 602 yards, 6 touchdowns, 17.7 yards per catch, as I already mentioned. Imagine what he can do in an offense run by Jake Bentley, who's going to pass the ball more and I think better than Tyler Huntley. I expect him to have more receptions, more touchdowns, and to be one of the main targets in big situations. Last year, towards the end of the year, that's what it seemed to be with Kuithe and Huntley, is that we needed a first down. We're facing third and long. He's hitting Kuithe. Now, that was without Covey, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays into effect. But I think Kuithe is one of those guys. Now, the second guy is the guy throwing the passes, and I think it's going to be Jake Bentley. I've said that a million times. I'm going to keep saying it until I see it happen because I think if I say it, it'll come true. But Jake Bentley transferred to be the starting quarterback. He did not come to Utah to sit on the sidelines and watch a lower classman run the show as he finishes his college career. That's not going to happen. So I'm going to compare Bentley's 2018 stats, which are probably the best of his college career, to Justin Herbert's 2019 stats, who we know was taken in the NFL draft pretty high by the Los Angeles Chargers. So Bentley's best stats: 240 completions, 388 attempts, 61.9 completion percentage, with 3,171 yards, 8.2 average, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Comparing that to Herbert, 286 completions, so Bentley's about 40 less. Mm-hmm. The attempts were 428. The completion for Herbert was 66.8%, so about 5% better. The yards were 3,471, so it's actually only 300 yards exactly, which is interesting. The yards per play, or per catch, or per throw, Herbert was less. He had 8.1. So Bentley had him there. And then the touchdowns are pretty close, 32 to Bentley's 27. Now, where Herbert was better was the amount of interceptions. He only threw 6 interceptions last year. And as I said earlier, Bentley had 14. But Sammy, that is so much closer than I expected it. When I was jotting down my notes, thinking about this show, thinking about what, the guys that have the most to benefit, I didn't realize it's not a huge difference. I think Herbert is definitely a better quarterback. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL right now. But I think if Bentley can tweak a couple of things, and especially with the quality of receivers that he has, I think he can really show people that he is worth a lot more, and he might be able to do something special this season.
For sure. I also wonder how many of those interceptions is because he's playing in the SEC. He's playing in one of the best like defensive conferences known.
Yeah.
But so I have two players that I think this is going to benefit the most. One on the offense and one on the defense. So I already mentioned Devin Lloyd. I think Devin Lloyd also could benefit from an extra year or another like this season so to boost his draft stock too. Like we already talked about this year he's going to be one of the keystones of the defense. He is a returning starter. He's played in these big time games. He had big plays last year. He had interceptions, he had sacks, he had strips, he had like strip fumbles. Like he had these big plays that Utah's defense needed. So I think Devin Lloyd is one that could really, really, really benefit from this. But my other player is Nick Ford on the Utah offensive line. Ford has been one of the best offensive linemen Utah's had in the last couple of years. I love Nick. I think he is so good at what he does. And I think that him and Devin are what I would call like on the bubble. Like they can benefit from from this season to help boost their draft stock for future years. So either if they choose to declare after their junior year, which would be this year, or if they come back for their senior season, it's just going to help them. And Nick Ford coming back to this Utah offensive line, you have him and you have Orlando Umana, two upperclassmen on that Utah offensive line with a lot of underclassmen as well. That's going to help him. He's going to be able to help these underclassmen get up to speed, get up to where they need to be. And I think Nick has a lot to gain. Utah's put a lot of guys in the NFL, if you really think about it. Garrett Bowles, Isaac Asiata, Sam Tevi. There's a lot of guys that Utah has put into the NFL that are offensive linemen. And I think Nick Ford is the next one that Utah puts in the NFL, whether it be at the end of this year or it be next year or whenever, or if he comes back for his senior year. He will be the next offensive lineman that Utah puts in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he has a great opportunity to do so. I think Utah is able to really produce quality offensive linemen just with the offense that they so often use to attack. I mean, I think it's not only do you need to protect the quarterback, but the gaps and the holes that they were able to open up for Zach Moss over the last couple of seasons and all of the great running backs that we've had in recent years. It's impressive, I'm sure, to NFL scouts. You need to be able to do both, and with the highly and fairly balanced offense that Utah runs, they do a good job and they get it done. And I think you've hit it right on the head there, Sammy. I think Ford's going to have a really good chance to prove himself this season, especially with a lot of questions around how the offense is going to be with all these new additions, with potentially bringing in a transfer, or if it's Cameron Rising, a guy that hasn't seen a lot of college snaps, he's going to have to be at the top of his game to make sure that guy's protected.
But even if Rising is the quarterback, they were on the same team last year. I'm not worried about chemistry at all. And I think that's another thing that Utah has going for them with the delaying of the season is that a lot of these guys have more time to get these chemistry and these bonds built up with the new additions with Bentley and with all the freshmen that are coming in and stuff. So I'm not worried.
Yeah, and they do have these next 6 weeks to really figure it out. I believe practice is going to start this week, which is really exciting. It'll be fun to see those guys back out on the field, throwing the old pigskin around, and it's a good time. It's great that Pac-12 football has decided to return, and I think Utah has a real shot to again compete for a Pac-12 championship.
For sure. So that's all the time we have for today on Ute Dash. We want to thank you again for tuning in. Also, be sure to check out our columns that are exclusively written for Sports Pac-12. You can follow them on Twitter at Sports Pac-12 and check out their website, sportspac12.com. Also, while you're on your computer, don't forget to check out our website, dashsports.tv, and follow us on social media at Dash Sports TV on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. So we'll see you guys around. And as always, go Utes!
Go Utes!